going to be kind of impromptu type interview. I mean, I've had in my head sort of a lot of the questions I wanted to ask.
Okay.
So, first of all, I had been looking at your artwork online, and I was very intrigued by the idea of the stitching, and because I guess you're a fibers artist for the most part.
I am, most of my art life, I've been a painter actually. So the embroidery has come, I guess now it's been maybe like 6 or 7 years that I've added embroidery to the mix.
Okay. And then you used, I guess you used the background of paint, and then you put the Nero Blooms on the paint with embroidery then. Okay. Now, where did you get the idea of the Nero Blooms themselves? I mean, where did you get the images and stuff like that?
So my sister's a neuroscientist, for one thing. I come from a family of scientists, so I feel like this kind of imagery is just in my world. So, but I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember why or how I found these PET scan images, but I knew that when I found them, I wanted to do something with them because I think they're really pretty. But for years, I had them hanging around my studio, didn't know what I was going to do with them. I had dealt with themes of mental health in my work before, but I hadn't used these images until a few years ago. And to be honest, I don't remember why I started, except that for me, they were just a powerful symbol of mental health conditions. And I found them compelling because they're really beautiful, and that's not usually what you think of when you think of mental health conditions. You know, you think of something very tragic and painful, and which they certainly can be, but I was very much struck by the beauty of these.
So you don't remember where you got the images themselves?
Oh, well, the images themselves, I get off the internet. So I get them from like university websites and NIH and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're the images that the general public can access, as opposed to, you know, scientific journals that are, you know, you have to pay lots of money to access them.
So they weren't in scientific journals, they were just on internet sites, or?
Yeah. So like NIH has a pretty robust site, you know, that has summaries of their research, and same with universities. A lot of them come from university websites, and it's more like from doing public education rather than doing any kind of, you know, study description or summary. Yeah.
Okay. So when did you first decide to start using them for your artwork?
About, I think the first one was probably 2016-ish. Yeah.
Okay. So you started putting these on your paintings, and then you teamed up with somebody else to make the pins and the patches off of your stitching.
Well, they're based on the same PET scan imagery. So that, yeah, I started doing the handmade work, and then a couple years into that, I have a friend who has a pin business, and she makes beautiful pins that have nothing to do with brains or mental health. But since she was a friend, I thought, why not make one of these into a pin? Because I think that would be really beautiful. And she agreed, and we made 3 designs at first: depression, bipolar, and schizophrenia. And they were just really instantly popular. We just promoted them on Instagram, and people just loved them. So it was just sort of a fluke, not a fluke, but what do you call those kinds of ideas? It was sort of random, and they were meant to be, I had envisioned them as sort of giveaways with exhibits of my handmade art, but they sort of took a life of their own.
So do you do a lot of workshops with the brain scans, or is this something something here in St. Louis is something new that you're doing?
I give talks. I have done a couple of workshops similar to what I've done here, just some sort of free-form embroidery type workshops. What else? I mean, I've taught a lot in my life, but I think the stuff that I've done connected to Nero Blooms has been more like artist talks.
Okay.
Yeah, I did a little coloring activity once connected to a show. I did a shrinky dink activity connected to one of my shows. Yeah, they make adorable little shrinky dinks. Yeah, that's about it.
So you've had a lot of interest in the Nero Blooms since you started doing this project then?
Yeah. And now I have 12 different designs, and the pins are still by far the most popular. But I have patches and bags and mugs and all sorts of swag, and and just the stories that people tell with them about their own experiences or family members' experiences. It's just incredibly moving. I have psychiatrists who buy them, and nurses and counselors and therapists, and I've had many teachers who tell me they wear them, in support of their kiddos who have disabilities of one kind or another. I've had nurses buy them as gifts for their entire ward or division in the hospital. So yeah, just sort of this wide swath of people. And then there are people who just collect these pins. They collect these enamel pins of all sorts of kinds. That's usually sort of teens to early 20s type people, and it's more about the pin itself.
Right. So
it's really interesting, the different audiences.
But it has brought in a lot of interest in mental health awareness. So this has become kind of a mental health awareness promotional item, sort of.
Yeah, it's become a tool for that, which, my art definitely is also a tool for talking about mental health issues, but for a very limited audience, just the audience of somebody who walks into a gallery and, other artists and things like that. And so this has been an incredible way to reach much wider swath, a much wider community, which is thrilling. And it's less about the art and more about the conversation. So yeah, it's been incredibly satisfying that way.
Well, I noticed when we were going up and down the Cherokee, putting up the stickers themselves, that most of these shops were more than welcome to put them in their windows when you mentioned mental health awareness. It's like they were very open for that. Yeah. Is this the way you've gotten, is this the kind of reception you've gotten everywhere you've gone?
I mean, this is only the second window project I've done. So I haven't done something quite like this before. How the window project came to be is that I was going to have a show in Amsterdam, and then COVID hit, or we were in the middle of COVID. Yeah, because it was last year. COVID lingered, I guess is more how you put it, when the show was supposed to go up inside a mental health center, and it was shut down to the general public, and it was not really appropriate to have the show there. But they have these big windows outside. And one of us, as we were brainstorming what to do, had the idea, I think one of the psychiatric interns had the idea, why not put work in the window? But my work is pretty small, not all of it, but a lot of it's small, and it's embroidery. So it's, I was sort of thinking, well, how would people see it in the window and all the glare and all that stuff? That didn't really appeal to me. And then I mentioned, well, what about just the graphics of the brains? And that's how we came up with putting large decals on the windows as the exhibit, or whatever you want to call it, as the installation. So that was the first time I'd ever done it quite like this before. And it was fantastic. The brains were about twice the size of the ones that we're using.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had to have them professionally installed because, as you know by now, somewhat challenging.
That it is.
Yeah. So, and the fact that they're so big, they could be seen from really far away. These were like big windows, big tall windows. Yeah, even as we were putting them up, a lot of people stopped and asked us questions. And I got to speak to a group of the clinicians and a few patients, and then I got to speak to a patient group, which was really great. And then they had a COVID outbreak, and I couldn't do it again, but I at least got to do it once. So it was absolutely incredible. Yeah. And so I thought, why shouldn't I do that here? You know.
So do you do a lot of traveling with your art then?
No, I don't. That was my first international show. Yeah, and then it turned out COVID was calm enough. I had a coinciding exhibit of my original art in an art center that wasn't right by the community mental health center, but was also in Amsterdam. So I had two things. It was kind of a crazy summer.
So does Amsterdam have community art like we do here in the United States?
They, I don't have a huge sense of that sort of scene there, but their art scene, yes, is definitely less commercial overall and much more because they have a pretty robust funding system from their government for artists. So artists aren't dependent on galleries for selling their work. They don't necessarily have to make work that's marketable. They do have to apply for grants, but there's a lot more funding than what we have here. So it's a very different system. So yes, artists tend to be sort of more community oriented, and this was a particular art center called Beautiful Distress, which is completely focused on art and mental health. So that's why it was for my people. Perfect place to show my work.
So how did you get involved in community work in the first place?
Oh gosh. I was always interested in mental health because my mom had bipolar. And so I grew up with that. And after college, after graduating undergrad with an art degree, I didn't exactly know what kind of work to go into. So I started out working at a place here, it's probably still around in St. Louis, called Life Skills. Worked for folks with developmental disabilities. And then from there, I started working at Places for People, who serves people with serious and persistent mental health conditions. And and then from there, I became an advocate for students on welfare in the community college system. And somewhere in there, when I was in that job, I thought, and these were very intense jobs, obviously. I didn't have a ton of time to make my art, and so I thought, I gotta get back to making art. So I went to grad school, and then came back here, and then worked for NAMI, and I, for a little over a year, I directed an organization called BSA Missouri that focuses on art and disability. And then moved back to Maryland. So, yeah, I've had my toe in this world of sort of service work and community work a lot.
Now, last night we had what we called a CAT workshop. Now, you belong to the organization CAT, or were you a part of that organization? And what is it exactly?
Yeah, CAT is not an organization. It's a training program. It stands for Community Arts Training. And it's run through the Regional Artists Commission in St. Louis. Been around, I want to say, 20 years. Well, Adelia would know because she's one of the first CATs. I think she said it was 1999. And it is a training program. It brings together, it's usually 12 people a year. I think it's about an 8-month program, pretty intensive. It brings together 12 people. Roughly half are like social service type workers or advocates or social policy folks. And then the other half are artists. And we get together and do readings and get training on sort of ethically working in communities, how to enter communities, how to work with people, not just come in and do something and leave. Talked about power, we talked about race. We did arts activities together. We saw sample, in fact, Con brought her program to us, and they did a performance of a piece. So we learned about other programs. We designed a sample program and wrote a mock grant application for a community arts program. So really, really awesome training program. We call ourselves CATS, and it's really like this wonderful network, because you know, if you meet another CAT, you know what kind of training they've gotten. You know that they have sort of this basis of understanding about community arts that not everybody has. So really, really valuable training that I think all artists who are interested in community arts would really benefit from, because it's complex work, as you know, like working with vulnerable populations can be delicate, and it's important to do it right, or as right as you can. And working with social service providers who are mostly overworked and underpaid, and they look at an artist and they're like, you want to do what? And I'm supposed to spend energy on what? You know, it's just something extra on their list, right? I mean, not all of them are like that, but sometimes it's a lot to ask. You're asking for more of their energy and time. So anyway, that's the long-winded explanation of CAT.
Is there anything else that you think that maybe some of the students that are in my class might like to know, might need to know about community service or anything else, or even the Nero Blooms?
Well, if they want to know more about Nero Blooms, they can go to the website, neuroblooms.com. I think I talked about that enough. I don't know. It seems like in your program in particular, you're getting a really great exposure to community arts and working in communities. I think that's awesome. I don't know if all art therapy programs have that, or if some are more clinically focused, but I think that's really great. Yeah. I think you got it.
I think I got everything.
Right.
I appreciate your time and letting me do this interview.
Of course.
All right.
My pleasure.